This is a 2003 Lincoln Town Car, and on the outside it pretty much looks like a 2003 Lincoln Town Car. It has modded wheels, but that's about it. It looks kind of like something Grandpa would drive. Well, under the hood it has a Terminator V8 swap from a Mustang Cobra, which makes this pretty much the greatest sleeper car of all time. And today I'm going to thoroughly review this Terminator Town Car and show you all of its quirks and features. Before I get started, big news, this 2003 Lincoln Town Car is currently for sale, being auctioned live on Cars and Bids. Like I said, this is no ordinary town car. It has a Terminator V8 swap from a Mustang Cobra, and it's tremendously well done, as I'll show you. And it can be yours on Cars and Bids. So, once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to go to the live auction for this Terminator Town Car. You can bid on it and buy it only on Cars and Bids. Alright, time for the quirks and features of the Terminator Town Car. I'm going to start with its most obvious quirk and feature, and that would be the engine. Out goes the 4.6-liter V8 from the regular town car, a boring, comfortable engine, and instead we have the supercharged V8 from the Terminator Ford Mustang Cobra. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Terminator Cobra is, the story is basically this. In '99, Ford came out with a new SVT Cobra. They said it had 320 horsepower, but people took these cars, got them on dynos, and discovered it was more like 285 horsepower, and the torque figure didn't match what they were claiming either. Ford was embarrassed. They stopped selling the cars. They skipped the entire 2000 model year. They went back, they retooled, and in 2003, they returned with the Terminator Cobra. It had a supercharged V8, now rated at 390 horsepower and 390 pound-feet of torque, and that was conservative. Ford didn't want to overstate things again and upset all the enthusiasts, so they played it safe and cautious by saying it only had 390 horsepower. These cars are legends. The Terminator Cobra, only made in '03 and '04, and still one of the greatest Ford Mustang models of all time, and now its powertrain is in this Lincoln Town Car, which obviously was never even thought about from the factory. Now, the standard V8 from the Lincoln Town Car, like I said, 4.6-liter, had about 240 horsepower. Not particularly exciting. The Terminator Cobra V8 stock had 390 horses, and this one has been modified. The owner tells me he thinks this one makes about 450 horsepower at the wheels, which suggests something like 500 to 550 horsepower using the standard measurement in a Lincoln Town Car, and that's just the coolest thing in the world. Now, there are a lot of upgrades and modifications that have been done to this powertrain, and I encourage you to click the link in the description below and actually go and check out the auction on Cars and Bids, where there is a long, full list of all the upgrades and mods that have been done to this engine by this owner and previous owners to make this car what it is. There's a long, long list, and I don't want to get into it because I'd miss a lot of stuff. But one thing I do want to really highlight, it was a major goal of the owner of this car to make it look factory under the hood. And when you open up the engine, it does look like this is how it probably would have looked from the factory. You don't have any giant bright colored things or stupid lines going to stupid places. Everything has been given a factory look. In fact, the owner told me that he worked hard to make sure that this cover stayed on the supercharger pulley. He says a lot of people who modify these powertrains pull it off and make some upgrades that require having it not in place, but he really wanted it to be there to look like how it should have been done from the factory, and I think that is so cool. It really makes this car seem like a Ford performance vehicle that should have been. Of course, that's true until you start really looking at it. You can see powered by SVT stamped right into the engine and the SVT logo right in front, and it's clearly not exactly a typical Lincoln engine, but fantastically done. And I asked the owner why was that such a priority, and he told me he really likes Fords. He's a Ford Lincoln guy, but he saw what General Motors was doing with all the Cadillac V cars, and he wished that Lincoln had done the same thing, so he did it. This is his version of what a Lincoln Town Car V would have been like if Lincoln had taken that page out of Cadillac's book. And it's not just under the hood, where the owner of this car wanted to make it look stock or like a Lincoln factory high-performance vehicle. It's also true of the exterior, where there are very few upgrades compared to a standard town car. One obvious one is these vents on the hood for heat dissipation. Probably nice to have. Standard town car didn't have it, but this one does. On the outside, you also have upgraded wheels. As you can see, these wheels aren't factory town car. Instead, they come from a newer Shelby Mustang. They look good, but they're not factory. Now, I asked the owner, why not just go back to factory wheels, make this a total sleeper? And he said the reason is contact patch with the ground. The rear wheels for the Shelby Mustang are a lot wider than the standard town car wheels, and so you get a lot more tire on the ground, which helps to actually get the power down. And he told me you could go back to standard town car wheels if you wanted to and make it a total sleeper, but then you'd be sliding around a lot because you just don't have that much rubber in back, since the standard town car wheels and tires weren't really all that wide. The owner told me he also looked far and wide to try to find white wall tires that would fit this wheel size, but apparently he wasn't able to, although that would have been a fantastic joke to add to the sleeper town car ethos of this car. Now, beyond the wheels and the hood vents, which are fairly obvious upgrades to the exterior if you know what you're looking for, there are also a few more subtle changes. For instance, all LED exterior lighting in this car to kind of give it a more modern look, and the front headlight shrouds have been blacked out, which also gives it sort of a meaner, more sinister, more performance-y look, similar to what Mercury did with the Marauder later in the model range. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. This car looks totally factory stock, aside from those little changes, right down to the executive badge on the rear pillar, which I guess was a trim level, and it just so perfectly fits this car. Yeah. Executive. And next we move on to the interior of the Terminator Town Car, where again it's mostly stock looking, which was a very intentional choice, although there are a few upgrades, most importantly with the gauges. The standard Town Car didn't even offer a tachometer, and so if you wanted to add that and a few others, you had to go this route. So some aftermarket gauges kind of stuck on the A-pillar, the boost gauge, and the air-fuel mixture, and plus a tachometer stuck on the steering column. Unfortunately, not really any other option there if you wanted these gauges in place. And if you're driving a car like this, you probably do. And so you do have a little bit of a modded look on the inside. But otherwise, fairly stock in here. One other noticeable upgrade is a screen in the center control stack. The standard Town Car, with its appeal to elderly people, wasn't putting screens in there. It would have been confusing, but this car has it for a more modern interior look. And that screen includes a backup camera, which is obviously nice to have for a car that is this large. But otherwise, this Town Car on the inside just looks like the elderly person cruiser that it is. You have big cushy seats. You can see leather with lots of cushy padding, and you flip up this center armrest and you have a 3-person front bench in this car, just like old school cushy luxury cars did. You got the speedometer with the giant font so that elderly people could more easily read that font, and giant font on the digital gauges next to the speedometer as well for the exact same purpose, all so elderly people could be comfortable in this car. And you even have the same fake wood trim that you had when this car was made new. Didn't get upgraded to carbon fiber like some people might be tempted to do. It still looks like an old school town car. You even have the same old school door pulls. You can see these leather loops that stick out. You're supposed to grab those to close the door. You do it pulling them, and that's how you get the car door closed. That's how Grandpa used to do it in his town car. And it's important to point out that in this interior, in addition to all of that town car stuff, you also have an automatic transmission. Now, the Terminator Cobras were only sold with a manual transmission, but this car, it's a Lincoln Town Car. It shouldn't really have a manual. It doesn't really fit the purpose of this car or the purpose of this build, so it has an automatic. The owner tells me this is the same automatic that came standard in the Town Car, and those transmissions are known for being pretty robust and being able to take a lot of power, although this one has been modified even further with some upgrades from a company called Gear Vendors, and the result is that it's even more stout, robust, reliable, and capable of taking the massive power that this car is making. Some people would be disappointed that this car doesn't have 3 pedals and a manual transmission, but I think the automatic fits the Lincoln Town Car more. Plus, if you put a manual in, you'd have to hack up the floor, which would really change the whole front bench seat persona of this car. It just doesn't work in a Lincoln. Now, there are a couple of interesting quirks in this interior that go beyond the Terminator Town Car and elderly person stuff that I want to point out. For one thing, I always thought it was funny that these cars had an analog clock right in the center, and then it's flanked by these two wings. It's supposed to look cool, luxurious, nice, but those wings are actually the clock adjustment buttons. You push them to change the hour and minute hands. It's crazy because those have to be the largest and most prominent clock adjustment buttons in history. It's not something you want to accidentally push, but in this car, they made them very, very obvious to contribute to the look of that analog clock. Another thing I have always loved about these Lincoln Town Cars is you have climate controls on the steering wheel. You can see these little buttons control the temperature and the fan speed, and I don't understand why modern cars dropped that. It's such a great idea. You already have audio controls and cruise control and a lot of other stuff on your steering wheel. Why not climate controls also? It's something you're going to be frequently adjusting, and it's nice to have buttons right there. I think these Town Cars were the very last car that had it, and it's something that I still love to this day. And next up, we move on to the back seat of the Terminator Town Car, which is just as cushy and luxurious as you'd expect from the back seat of a Lincoln Town Car. You got a lot of space back here, a comfortable, cushy leather seat. You can kind of lie down and relax as you're being driven around in your 500 plus horsepower Town Car muscle car. You even have climate vents back here, which is pretty nice. A lot of cars didn't have that 20 years ago, even luxury cars like this. So it's nice to get a little airflow dedicated for rear seat passengers. And you have the elderly person stuff back here too, like the fake wood trim and that leather loop sticking out from the door so that you can more easily close it without reaching too far, just like Grandpa would have wanted. As for the rear of this car, the trunk, it is absolutely massive. As you can see, a huge trunk, which was a common thread among full-size body-on-frame sedans like this car, the Crown Victoria, various other Cadillacs, Buicks, big body cars from the 70s, 80s, 90s, all had big trunks, and this Town Car is included in that. One big annoyance about the trunk of this car is there's no latch you can use to just pop it open, which by 2003 had become quite common, but Lincoln hadn't yet adapted. So you got to either stick in the key or press this blue button on the key fob, and then the trunk pops open and you can do it the rest of the way. Now, the trunk makes up for this annoyance by doing something cool when you close it. You don't have to slam it down. Instead, just sort of lightly latch it and it will automatically grab it and latch it the rest of the way. It has a soft close trunk, which would have been very cutting edge back in 2003 when this Town Car was first made. But as cool as talking about this car is and showing you the engine, the interior, the subtle sleeper exterior, this car is a lot more about the driving experience. That's the coolest thing about this car, not the quirks and features of it sitting still. So, time to get behind the wheel for an extended test drive of the Terminator Town Car. Let's do it. Actually, before I do that, let's take a quick listen to what this car sounds like. It's going to totally mess with your mind because it looks like a Lincoln Town Car, but it sounds like this. With that out of the way, now let's get behind the wheel and see how the Terminator Town Car drives. All right, time to drive the Terminator Town Car. And I've been waiting for this moment pretty much all day. Just gonna do it. Holy crap! Oh my God, that's incredible! I gotta do it again. Oh, it's so fast. This is the coolest thing ever. The genesis of this video is this car was submitted on Cars and Bids, and there was like a discussion in the office as to what the swap was, because he hadn't mentioned like that it had a Terminator swap. He mentioned all the other upgrades. And we're looking at it, we're like, that's not a stock Town Car engine, you know, just trying to figure it out. I said, I think that's a Terminator. And so I was like, I gotta review this car. You know, I don't usually review modded cars, but the thing I love about this one is, I love clean swaps. And the thing I love about this car is it is a clean swap. Like, this almost feels like if they had done this, and obviously that was the owner's goal, and it really came out that way. The first thing I noticed when I'm driving this car, aside from just jamming the throttle and laughing, is it's not janky, this car. There's no warning lights on in the dash. The air conditioning works. The range works, telling me, you know, when I'm running out of fuel. The speedometer works. The odometer works. Like, everything in this car basically feels like it should have been like this from the factory, with the exception of a few aftermarket gauges that are kind of important, like a tach and like air fuel mixture and that kind of thing. You probably want to be checking out boost. But other than that, like, car looks and feels OE. And that, as much as I love cars that are stock, the only thing I like more is cars that are modded so perfectly that you never would have known that they were modded at all. And that's this. Really, this car is just an absolute blast. Now, because the owner didn't do anything with the suspension in this car, or really didn't do much, except for the police package Crown Victoria suspension, you know, it doesn't handle incredibly well. He told me specifically he wanted to preserve the ride quality. That was a goal of his. And as I'm sitting in this car, and especially where he is, a little bit more of a rural area here in Southern California, you get some longer distances to drive, I can understand that. It's kind of nice to just sort of sit here and be wallowed along like you would have wanted from a Lincoln Town Car. You have the benefit of the performance without compromising the ride, but that means that you don't get the benefit of like super tight, super quick handling, which you probably could with the very right suspension setup. This car could probably handle okay. It's still going to be a heavy, big body-on-frame sedan, but I bet you could dial it in more, but you would then lose the ride quality. So it's sort of a matter of preference. In terms of driving this car, like I mentioned, like, it just doesn't feel like a swap. It just feels fine. I mean, this is the ultimate sleeper car. This thing is so incredibly cool. It just is so incredibly cool. And you just dump the throttle, you just even tap the throttle a little and you're like in the next zip code. This car is so much faster than a Lincoln Town Car has any right to be. I feel like to do this right, you really got to put up this center armrest and have this giant wide leather bench seat here. You feel like you're in some old school elderly person car on a drive through the country. And then now, the transmission in this car feels very tight. Like I mentioned, there's some significant modifications that went into this trans, although it is the standard Lincoln Town Car transmission, just with some upgrades. The owner told me the transmission in these is very robust. It can handle a lot of power, and this car has a lot of power. And I kind of like the fact that it's an auto. That's not the point of a Lincoln Town Car. This car is about, like, automatic transmission, luxury sedan kind of thing. And so this car is that. All right, gonna step on it again. The supercharger wide is just, it's so not right. It shouldn't be. I'm in a Lincoln Town Car. Interestingly, I just jammed on the brakes pretty quick for a turn that I was about to miss. And actually, they stopped the car reasonably well. This car doesn't have like upgraded brakes, but it still seems relatively quick to stop. This is so cool. It's just so cool. It's not emissions compliant. It's not smog compliant. Et cetera, but you could probably get it there. And more importantly, it's just cool. That doesn't matter. When your car is this cool, that doesn't matter. I am in love with this thing. I'm just astonished. You don't lose that much of the benefit of the Lincoln Town Car. It still feels comfortable and nice and cushy. And honestly, if you keep your foot out of it, it drives pretty reasonably, just with sort of a low rumble that gives a hint as to what it is. But once you step on it, then you have this incredible other benefit that's really cool. This is like a best of all worlds kind of situation, and I think this car is just awesome. Realistically, this is probably the coolest Lincoln Town Car in the world. It's got a zillion miles, as you would expect, because you kind of had to have a zillion miles in order to do a swap like this and like justify it. But I think the thing that's cool about it is like it's all been done well, and especially the current owner has really fine-tuned it to make this car like as perfect as it could possibly be and as stock feeling as it could possibly be. And it does in fact feel stock like this. It's amazing. This is so cool. It's the best of all worlds. You get Lincoln Town Car luxury and you get a ridiculous powertrain. This is probably the coolest modded car that I've ever driven in my life. I love sleepers, and I love how nicely this one's been done. And so that's a 2003 Lincoln Town Car. A nice, big, floaty, elderly person, cushy, luxury sedan, except this one isn't quite. This is amazing, and it can be yours on Cars and Bids. And now it's time to give the Terminator Town Car a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 57 out of 100, which places this town car very high against other similar vehicles, not that anything is really similar to this. The Terminator Town Car even beats out the actual Terminator Mustang Cobra, though of course the Mustang wins in the weekend categories. But when you add it all up, the town car's cushy ride and its enjoyment factor are truly an excellent combination. This is an awesome swap, and not only is it very cool, but I love how factory it feels, and I'm so happy I got to review this car.